Hey everyone, welcome to the Lighthouse. My guest today is Joe DeCastro. As you can see on screen, he is the creator of this visualization that we're looking at that looks at the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. I'm really excited to dig into this with Joe. So Joe, how are you doing overall? It's fun talking with you beforehand and just kind of getting some insights into this. So what are we looking at?
So what we're looking at right now is we're looking at the article graph for the Bertrand Russell article from the SEP. For those here who might not know of it, the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy is really one of the web's great resources for philosophy. It's every article that they publish there, it's trying to be the canonical article about that topic. There's an editorial board. Each article has a lit review. Each article really is just the canonical version of it. But the thing about the SEP is that it's hard to navigate. You know, its use case is to be the resource. So they're not worrying about navigation, about being able to explore the entire domain resource. So I built this site as a way to help users explore the site, both from a research point of view, but also just a really fun way to explore this incredible encyclopedia.
Yeah. And it's definitely that. And now I really want to dive in a little bit more to the why, but really curious, why are we starting on Bertrand Russell out of all places? Besides that, it looks really cool.
I tend to start with the Russell graph because I know a little bit about Russell, and it's kind of easier for me to riff on the different features that are available in my application by starting on the Russell graph. Now, we could go anywhere. We'll see the other version. There's two main graphs. There's the article graph, and then there's the domain graphs. But we always start, or I always start when I'm training someone with a particular article. And I just tend to like to start with Russell. It's a big, pretty, but it also allows me to talk about some of the different features that aren't quite apparent when you first look at it, but show the real power of visualizing SEP.
I think one of the other reasons I wanted to have you on is selfishly because I was like, well, I want to learn from Joe himself, you know, how you navigate this and what the little tips and tricks are to really fly around. I mean, sometimes I get goosebumps and I just do looking at all these different things. And I think that's like, to your point, I didn't quite realize that part of the why of, you know, why you created this. One of the reasons, I think there are some other passionate reasons that we're going to get into, but some of the practical reasons is just to really help with the navigation of, as you put it, the canonical versions of a lot of these topics, thinkers, domains, and whatnot. Where would we go from here?
So in some sense, I kind of want to start with, I'm going to open up the Bertrand Russell article from the SEP itself so that people can have a sense of what makes visualizing SEP so cool. So if we go to, when you're on this graph here, you can always get into the original article from Stanford from inside the graph. So you come up here to this article details button, and right over here, you have the SEP link. So if I open that up, now we're going to go into the encyclopedia itself. So if I was on the encyclopedia and I wanted to know about Russell, you know, I could go and I could search the archive here for Bertrand Russell. Now we're already there. So it would show you this article, but it's huge. You know, it is a really, really long, intense article. So you don't understand the context in which Russell was performing his work. You can learn about Russell and his innovations and the time period, but you can't actually get a sense of what else was going on, how Russell relates to other philosophers, other domains and schools of thought. So to come back to visualizing SEP, the reason why I did this is that you want to look about Russell. So you have our interface here. You get the super tiny over here, just quick introduction, depending on it's 300 characters, maybe 500 characters. But then you'll have now this article domains. And what this is the domains of philosophy in which Russell is working. Now, thinker isn't a domain. That was my taxonomy just to link philosophers. But Russell is known for really three major forms of philosophy: his work in logic, his work in philosophy of mathematics, his work in metaphysics. So this here tells you that. And then The graph is showing you every article in the entire encyclopedia that links to Bertrand Russell in some way. This could be a bidirectional link. Russell could link to the article, and the article could link back to Russell. It could be the articles that link from the Russell article to other ones, or it could be the articles that link into. And what this is showing you, and what's interesting about this, is it's providing the context. And I think that's one of the things that makes Visualizing SEP really interesting. Your standard search engine is going to return a single scalar article. It might show you other articles that might fit that same search term, but it's not showing you the context. And this is what Visualizing SEP is doing. So it's showing you the context that Russell's working in. There are 77 articles, which you can see here. On this right side here, this is showing you the primary domain, the main thrust, the main category that each article was in, and it's showing you how many. And each of these categories has a color representation that's the same throughout the site. So epistemology is always going to be a light yellow. Ethics is this orangey pink. And then down here, this is going to show you the directional links. So at first, this is cool, but you can really deep dive. And once you mouse over things, now you can focus on this particular thing that you're looking at. So you wanted to see all the outgoing links. So these are the 13 links that the Russell article links to. These are the 46 links that link into Russell. Same thing is up here with the primary domains. You want to see what are the philosophers that Russell links to. Well, now we're just focusing on this. What's the philosophy of mathematics articles? So you can just continually update your focus points. And I think a really beautiful way to be able to kind of deep dive into some of this stuff here. The other thing you can do is you mouse over, you mouse off, so you lose that. But if you single click on an article, now this stays. And you can say, now I'm just going to look at the articles. These are the articles on metaphysics. And each time you mouse over one of the articles in the graph, you're going to get on the left sidebar a quick update for what it is. And you can then just get a good sense of, okay, these are the different articles in metaphysics, but now I want to look at epistemology. And I can continually update the graph and continually explore the different articles that link to it. That's one way of doing it. The coolest thing I think that this graph does, though, is when you're looking at the articles themselves, you have this big graph. And when you mouse over one of these articles, though, you're going to see some of them disappear and some of them don't. And you'll see that there are these dashed lines going from the article that you've presently moused over to other articles. What this is showing you is this is showing you the subset relations within the article graph itself. So this article on sense data, that's an article that Russell links to, but these are the articles that stay active. These also link from sense data. So now you have this relationship between sense data also links to these articles that share some conceptual space with Russell itself. If you wanted to say, all right, I know Russell and Wittgenstein they're linked for tons of reasons, and you want to have some sense of that. So you can come down here to Wittgenstein, and now you're seeing all of these articles share links between the Wittgenstein main article and the Russell article, because this is the context that we're exploring and how Russell was working. And same here, you can freeze this graph and then get a better sense if you want to see these articles, or you can just unfreeze it. Again, a single click will freeze the graph, and then a single click again on the frozen node, unfreeze the graph, and you're back to the very beginning, and you can just keep exploring all of these different things. One other thing that you can see in here is up here in the default mode of the graph, you have this list of articles feature on the right. And what this does is this gives you an alphabetical listing of every article on the graph itself. So when you can click that heading, and now you have an alphabetical listing. The radial graph isn't alphabetical. And I did that because I wanted to have jarring spelling differences so that you didn't get too comfortable in one particular way of going, okay, I'm going around the graph clockwise, A, B, C. I really wanted to spur some sense of play. But if you want to have that alphabetical list, then you can just come over here to the list of articles, and you can still mouse over and get the same subset relations. But if you don't want to see that, then you just double click that, you single click that again, that gets hidden. And now you can look at the just domain list and the direction list. Another quick thing that you can do is that when you come out over here to the articles details button, now every article, you can click the article details button there, but you can also just hold down your shift key. And then as you mouse over any one graph, you can then pull up the article details for that one graph. Okay. And when you do that, it immediately expands over here that alphabetical list, because now you can't see the graph itself, but you still want to know how these articles relate to each other. And then when you close that,
can you do that one more time?
Sure.
Just because I was a little slow. So basically, you're holding down Shift.
Yes. Yeah, so you can click the article details, this button here, but instead of having to do that, if you hold down the Shift key, and as you mouse over any of these articles, you can bring up the article details data for that particular article. Mm-hmm. And when you do that, on the right-hand side, the list of articles appear so that you can then figure out if you want to look at which other articles you want to look at. If you're in the graph, you single click again and it closes it down.
And so that list of articles that appears coincides with whatever pops up on the screen. So
yes, so
that makes sense.
And when you freeze a graph, okay, now you only have these 8, 10 graphs, 10 nodes frozen. When you come back to the list of articles, it's going to dim those that are also hidden. So now you can just go back and see from this view if you wanted that. When you're looking at the graph, it's not really helpful to be able to see it because now you're just duplicating the information there. But when you're in that article details and you can't see the graph, but you also know that anything that has a full opacity title, it's sharing a link. It's part of the context in which the details that you're looking at, how that also relates to the Russell graph.
Very nice.
That was my super quick overview of the article graph. Do you have questions about that?
Yeah, well, I definitely do. As John said in the chat, breathless and speechless. I mean, what you said at the top, really, and I want to continue to hammer that point home. It's really all about context. And I'm glad you start with Bertrand Russell because he's somebody that I've looked at and I'm like, everyone talks about Bertrand Russell, but I'm not quite sure what he does. And I think it's because he's done so much. That's one. And two, he's been so prolific that, I mean, he's written so many words, so many words that it's difficult for me. I didn't go to school for philosophy. It's difficult for me to wrap my head around Bertrand Russell. But then I look at something like this and I can start to tether him to all these other ideas and concepts, domains, people. And that's how learning is done. That's how we don't just, it's not a one and done. The one and done approach that I've done for way too long. And so many people, you go on Wikipedia because you heard about this person. And then, how long do you last there before you burn out? And you remember that information for 2 days and then you forget it. You don't come back to it. But with this sort of context, I can really start to see how I can tether this to, other people and really create what's going on in real life, which is part of that conversation that Bertrand Russell was a part of when he was living and interacting with these other ideas and people who came much before him, oftentimes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things that this started just as a school project. I was learning D3, which is this amazing data viz library. And then it really just became something where I was like, I can really build something I think very helpful and very interesting here. Because as you're saying, and I say in the homepage, the web of knowledge that links ideas, philosophers, schools of thought together is important in any field, but I think that it's especially true in philosophy. There's a saying that philosophy is the great conversation, and in some sense that's true. And the way in which philosophy progresses is through understanding the conceptual and creative links that these different ideas have spurred in each other. And to go on your point about, so you want to know about Russell and the Wikipedia article is too long and the SEP article is too long. One of the other things that you can do that I didn't show yet is, so you're on the Russell graph and you open up this details. And when you open up the details, you get a bit more of the abstract. Depending on the length of the abstract, I still have to cut it off some, because I'm not interested in people reading the article here. I want to push them into the SEP to learn about the things that they want. But so with you, Nick, all right, you know about Russell, but you don't really understand exactly what it is. So when you open up the article details, you have this table of contents here. Now I'm pulling this from the encyclopedia itself, but these are all active links. So if what you want to learn about is specifically, you want to learn about Russell and his atheism, then you come down here, you click on that link, and it not only brings you into the article at the encyclopedia, but when it loads, it'll actually bring you down into that particular part of the article. So now we're just at Russell's atheism. And if that's something that you were interested in, then you could just come there, and any article that you use in Visualizing SEP, that table of contents is always an active link. And it's always going to bring you right inside the encyclopedia article itself at that particular anchor point.
That's really amazing that it goes right to the anchor point. I mean, I just can't get over this though, because there are so many people that I've looked at and I've just kind of always wondered, what do they connect to? They're always in isolation. This person had this idea and that was important, I guess, but it's always in isolation, and it comes and it goes. And without the broader conversation, it's kind of been sad to me how much of those sources of philosophy have escaped me from being able to kind of build in this way that I find quite sustainable. Note making is what we might say in my neck of the woods, but in a way that scales and compounds in personal value over time. That's what this tool is. I'm just so excited about it.
Thank you. Yeah, and I completely agree. And that's one of the things that when I was building it, I was really trying to figure out how to make a fun and pretty interface, but also one that was powerful, because, when you have your own aha moments in the shower, or you're walking down the street and a car goes by and the screech of the tire then makes you think of a song that you heard. And then that song that you heard is like, oh, you know what? I have a problem at work that now I just figured out how to do it because I was spurred through. I didn't figure that out on my own. It wasn't my free will sitting down there and figuring out that answer. It was this intuitive creation at that moment. And for this site itself, I really wanted to build in those intuitive moments so you can explore it in an infinite number of ways. How you want to go around that Russell graph. It's, you want to look at Wittgenstein, or you want to look at Moore, or you want to look at something in epistemology and logic. Your own individual path through the graph is going to be providing context for you to have new intuitions.
Absolutely. That's a good way to look at it too. Those new intuitions. I like that a lot, because it's the opposite of being told what to do, whether that's by a top-down curriculum, or in the world of like task management. If you have too strong of a task list, that's telling you what to do. And then, well, hey, great, you don't have to worry about it. That anxiety goes down. That's nice, but you also lose something. You lose that intuitive ability to adapt to new information and maybe do something that is now the priority. In that same way, this kind of draws out a more organic, intuitive way of approaching ideas and learning.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like you're on Russell, you've now explored this whole graph, and, you're just having fun, like, doing this wheelie thing where it's pretty, but, now you're like, all right, I've started with Russell. What I really want to look at is the correspondence theory of truth. And so you mouse over that article, you double click that article, and then the graph reloads. And then this is how you start to navigate between the articles, not just seeing the relationships of one article, but now you can navigate the entire encyclopedia in a really efficient, really fun manner. So you come to the correspondence theory of truth article, and you can do all the same things. Okay, these particular set of links that are active, these are the subset relations, these that share this context. Now you can just jump through. And each time you jump through, you get, every other article linked to. So now I'm going to feminist philosophy of law. So now I can now get into something, into the critical theories. And from these critical theories, now I can explore the incredible critique of Western philosophy that feminism has spurred and got us to think in new ways. So I mentioned earlier, philosophy is known as the great conversation, but it's absolutely true that more people have been excluded from that conversation than have taken part in that conversation. And we absolutely want to get beyond those limitations and those exclusions. And one way you can do this is, now you're at feminist philosophy of law, and now you can get into the critical theories and all of these different articles. Now we can get into, this is going to be on about ableism. And now we can get into the part of the encyclopedia where we're getting into the critical theories about the tradition that we're both exploring, but also now we're critiquing. And that's, I think, one of the things that makes the Stanford Encyclopedia such a powerful tool, because I think they're very aware of now who has been excluded, and now they're building out additional sections. So there's much more information on non-Western philosophy, on Chinese philosophy, on feminism. And we can then start to learn from within the tradition those critiques of the tradition itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Which one is much needed. Everyone needs to have a voice at the table. That's how those diverse perspectives allow us all to be more enriched. And two, I think I forgot my 2. So I'll go to 3, which is, I'm so happy that these topics are being included, especially going back to another point. I'd run into somebody like Mencius, he was a Chinese philosopher. I'm like, this person is saying things, and I think Plato's probably said similar things, but I don't quite, I'm an amateur here. I don't quite understand how to make that link. And this is, I'm so excited to jump back into it, explore that person from long ago, Mencius, and understand, where he falls into this great conversation. A couple things, because I don't want to run out of time here. So a couple things that I think are interesting I want to go over are links, are your choices on primary domain, where you mentioned thinker, and just what information the Stanford Encyclopedia philosophy provided you, and what information you added as tags, so to speak. Okay, so what I found interesting is the tool of choice that I use to manage knowledge is Obsidian, and they now have the ability to be more clear about the direction of a link. So yes, not everything is bi-directional. You can say by default it is, meaning, a link there, you're connecting 2 pieces of knowledge, but is it incoming or outgoing? That's kind of important. And I think what you're showing here is putting a spotlight on why it's important in a very practical, fully encapsulated example. A lot of people are wondering, why do I need incoming links? Or they're just all links, right? But you're showing an actual use case, because you're tracking references in a story that's being told. And so it's really clear here. It's so amazing to me to see this type of use case.
Yeah, and everything at all the articles in the SEP, there is the authors, and then there's the editorial board that reviews all of this. So, and they're going to come up with what's validly going to be linked and what those link directions mean. Now, it doesn't mean that there's an intuition that a bi-directional link might have stronger weight, that not only does article A link to article B, but article B also links back to article A. So there is a certain default intuition that might be a stronger relationship between those 2 articles. It's not necessarily the case, because there are going to be different editors and different people on the board at different times and different authors. So it's not something that you can say is a canonical example of relationships, but I think it is something where it is interesting when you look at who's linking to what and how. And that does tell you something. It might not tell you everything you think it does, but it tells you something interesting about those relationships. And it's something that you can explore. I mean, there are articles that have, 0 bi-directional links, and there are articles that you would think that would be linked together that actually don't share one. So
Mhm.
It's not a perfect use case. Like, for example, the article on David Hume. Hume and Kant are related in a lot of ways. Kant has this really famous saying that reading Hume awoke him from his dogmatic slumbers, that Hume's critique of metaphysics and epistemology really spurred Kant to develop his own critical theory. Now, the Hume article doesn't link to the Kant article directly. So that's something that that's an expectation that if you already know that, then you're like, huh, that's surprising. So these aren't perfect, but there are enough opportunities for overlap and
Yeah.
intuition building and coming together that
Mm.
even though they're not perfect, I think they're still really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And good analysis of there about how we can approach it here.
Mhm.
And then personally, it's interesting. So in one's personal knowledge management, you can be a little bit more confident that a bidirectional link would carry more weight.
Right.
But to your point, when you're looking at a collection of different editors and contributors, it's only one data point to help build
Mhm.
intuition. Like you said, that was a good term, intuition building. Um, okay, the other ones I'm really curious about. Those primary domains, like we're looking
Mhm.
on the right,
Yep.
those were provided by the architecture of SEP, right?
They were not actually.
Oh, wow.
The encyclopedia doesn't have a domain tagging metadata feature. If you go to the main table of contents, it's broken down into certain categories. Like there's a category for quantum mechanics, there's a category for aesthetics, but they don't actually spend a lot of time trying to provide domain categories for the articles. So everything that you see, I built. What I did is there's a project at Indiana University called the Indiana University Philosophy Ontology Project, and they
Hmm.
developed a domain taxonomy by which to link articles together and tag them. The info project for people who are watching, it's info.org. I can put that in the chat when we're done if you want to see how this taxonomy was built. So what I did is I took the
Yeah.
taxonomy that Indiana University developed, and theirs is much more detailed, but I took about, I think there's 27 categories that I used. And so what I did is I took the categories that I wanted to fit the articles into, and then through a mix of text search, topic modeling, and just old-fashioned hard coding, I actually went through and I tagged every article with at least one domain. Most articles I've tagged with having multiple domains. And I did that because I wasn't just making things up. I was trying to be really broad stroke and how to tag an article because I was seeing them like language games. Each taxonomy that we use is itself it's a trade-off, but between specificity and openness. And for the
Hmm.
user of the site, I wanted them to be able to see and follow whatever train of thought that spurred in their mind. So for this article here on feminist perspectives on disability, well, clearly the primary domain is going to be feminism. But this is also going to be tagged with social and political philosophy, because now we're talking about a particular cultural practice about ableism and disability. So for all of these articles, you're probably going to have 2, 3. I think I tapped out maybe 4 was the most that I added. But the
Okay.
idea was that this article then will appear within multiple domains. So if you're
Hmm.
looking at something from the grouping level, you're not limited to just the most perfect, secure version of what category this is. You're navigating a space where there are really fluid boundaries. And again, so you could then explore your own intuitions and follow that train of thought. I actually haven't shown the domain graph yet. So why don't I bring that up and then we can talk more about this, because that was a really fun but also difficult part of this project.
I would say, and to Joe's point in the chat, okay, like now this is an even bigger wow. That's a massive contribution to the world's knowledge that that you took forth and to categorize all these articles, which I'm sure you know roughly how many articles there are, and it's going to be a big number. And to
1708.
1708 articles that you categorized using this Indiana University's project, that ontology, as kind of your structure, but then
Mhm.
to make sense of it in that way. And that's what you're doing. You're making sense of this for the rest of us and trying to do your best responsibly to provide this information through these domains. So
Mhm.
I just like, that's a big wow. And I think I need to really address that. It's not just clicking a couple magic programming buttons and it's all done. Like you put in a lot of
Yeah.
thinking yourself, like your
Yep.
own sense making. So, I mean, I don't know how to best say bravo to you, but I just, yeah, keep
Thanks.
going, show us the domain graph, but that's just something really awesome.
Oh, yeah, cool. So yeah, so I'll start with these two, but again, every article has, and as I update, you'll see that the different names change based on the article itself. So we'll start with
And sorry,
here.
just one
Yes.
interruption because I love constraints. So are you telling me that there's roughly around 20, you said 27 domains? Was that
Yes.
accurate?
Yep.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yep. So we'll actually go to this article here, which now has, there are 3 domains that this article is tagged with. There's social and political, there's ethics, and then there's philosophy of biology. Now, depending on how we want to model disability, then maybe that is a question for the philosophy of biology. How do you define that? Generally speaking, though, this is going to be an issue about social theory and ethics. So if you want to load the domain graph, there is in the search bar, you can just select a domain, but in this case, just double click on this. Now we're coming to the other part of the site.
Hmm.
And this is a network graph of every article that has been tagged with social and political philosophy. And when the graph loads, there's no labels on the nodes because that was going to be too cognitively dissonant to make all
Too
that
much.
stuff. But this is showing you something. From right here, you can look at the size of each particular node is going to correspond to the number of links within that particular domain that article shares. So these nodes that have the biggest circles, this is going to be a major central point of this domain. Now, when I mouse out there, now this guy up here, there's no other links. It's a smaller circle because it's at the periphery of this domain. So just by looking at the domain graph, you get some sense of the structure. Now, over here on the right, though, you're going to see, all right, there's 291 articles that are tagged with social and political philosophy. Now, that's going to be both as its primary domain and its secondary domain. So you'll then be able to see from this list that there are different colors have different primary domains, but these domains link. These are fluid boundaries. So
Mm-hmm.
you'll see then the top 5. Now, this is going to be the top 5 articles in the domain in terms of where they sit within directional networks. Liberalism, 61. Okay, that has the most links. And when you mouse over, instead of putting the nodes on the labels right by the nodes themselves, that was going to be too dissonant. We just put them on the side,
Okay.
they're linked alphabetically, so you can get a sense of what else liberalism links to. Now, the second article here is John Rawls. John Rawls is a philosopher, the most famous and important political philosopher of the last 50 years. So he's a philosopher first, so he has a different color, he has a different domain, but of course he's part of this graph. And now we come down here, consequentialism. This is the 5th most linked graph in this domain. That's ethics. Ethics is the main domain that consequentialism will live in, but of course, consequentialism is going to be part of a social and political philosophy. And so you have now this list down here of every different article in the domain, different colors, so that you know exactly where you are, what the central focus of each of these articles is. But as you start to explore here, now you can see, all right, this links to this, and this links to this, but we have the same user experience features here. You can then click on a node, and now the graph is frozen again, just like before. And as you come down here, it's actually going to show you where that particular article lives within that domain network. It's going to show you that kind of laser beam, but also here, hold down the shift key, and you can get the domain details, get the article details. And just like before, it's the articles that are going to be hidden, they're going to dim. And then you can scroll the list to see, okay, these are the articles now within this particular domain. These share links together. And again, you can just continually navigate this particular domain relationships. You can reset the graph to go back to the main thing. And if you're on an article, you double click a node. Now you can go back to the article graph and get information about that article within the encyclopedia, not just within that particular domain. But you can then just keep going back and forth depending on the information that you're interested in exploring at this one time. And there are all these different, where's my, oh, you have this recent searches button here. This is going to be your 10 most recent searches. So if you will, like, you know what, hey, I actually want to go back to something that I saw, you forget what it was, you can come up here and then it'll find that again. But if you want to just go to look at all of the domains, and get here, and now you have a list of every domain. And the domain are colored, and the color scheme that I chose was 27 bits of data. That's way too many colors to try to define an easy to read graph. So what I did is I grouped them. And the articles on philosophy of science, philosophy of physics, these are blues. They're different blues. Philosophy of biology is a lighter shade of blue than philosophy of physics, which is a lighter shade of blue than philosophy of science. Philosophy of, say, mathematics, all right, that's going to be probably linked more to logic and philosophy of computer science. So these are greens. And philosophy of language, also a greenish color. So when you're looking at the different colors and with the domain names, you're actually looking also at a color grouping of similarity of domains. Now, we didn't want to do this where the only differentiator there was color. We want to use the names first because there are people who have color deficiencies. But this is just an additional way of being able to look at this information and then see how different domains might be linked together as well.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like the bidirectional link sort of thing where it's suggesting something. You need to look into it to kind of understand what it is. So their intuition builder.
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
Understanding the context. Yeah. So you showed us the recent searches at the top, the domain search with the 27, and then in search article, the only other one I was just kind of curious at, it seems like we can search by title or search actually within all of the text, or what does that mean exactly, the text?
Okay, so when you're looking on the site itself, the default way of searching for articles is just looking for a relationship of words in the title based on what you're looking for. If you want to look for actual text or concepts that within the full text of the article itself, you have to click on this text button here. And in this case, it would be, I mean, you might want to use it if you were looking for a philosopher that you expected to be in there, but wasn't. Maybe someone like Noam Chomsky. So if you wanted to search Chomsky, well, there are no articles on Chomsky, but Chomsky might appear within the text of an article about someone. So then you could go do a text search, hit go. Now, the one thing here, though, is when you do this text search, this brings you back over to the Stanford site. I'm not able to do a direct search from inside Visualizing SEP of the database in the encyclopedia itself that they use, because I built this as a passion project on my own. Stanford didn't hire me to do this. This was just something that like I wanted to do for myself. So I don't have the access rights to get into their domain.
Sure.
So, but if you want to do that, you go when you do a search, select the text button, and then the text you search for in Visualizing SEP will bring you into the actual Stanford site. So now, all right, now these are the articles that the Stanford site is going to mention that references Noam Chomsky. So in this case, this is one thing that I would like to make it more seamless. I would need to actually get permission from them to do that. So I haven't done it. But in this case, then you could just remember, all right, this is philosophy of linguistics. You could come back here. And then if you want to see that graph there for philosophy of linguistics, here we go. Now you can go in and you can look at the philosophy of linguistics article graph back inside Visualizing SEP.
Okay. Yeah, quite amazing. I think we should open it up for some questions. Just want to
Okay.
make sure though, is there anything that you want to hit at that haven't covered yet?
I don't think so. This is something that I'm going to keep updating. I actually haven't updated it yet for the summer. Stanford releases updates every 3 months.
Oh, okay.
And normally when they release an update for what's been added to the encyclopedia, I immediately go in, import those updates. So I'm always keeping the site live in terms of what's related to Stanford. However, I haven't updated from the June update yet because I've been so busy with my other client work. But I'm always updating the site every 4 months to make sure that this will stay current with what's new and updated in the encyclopedia itself.
That's amazing that you're doing that. And you're just doing it because it's a passion project.
Yeah.
So hopefully you can continue doing that. And if not, then hopefully, people can start paying you to do that. But yeah, before we get into Q&A, what's the best place if people wanted to reach out to you? Where would you want to send them to?
So my website just for my business work is josephdecastrollc.com. I think you had that in the link for the event.
Okay.
And if they want to send me an email, joe@josephdecastrollc.com. That's my business website. That's probably the best way to get a hold of me.
Okay, cool. And then let's both open the Q&A. And I can kind of read them out loud, but just so you can see them ahead of time. And it seems like TJ, there are a few that have 3 thumbs up, so I'm going to go with those 3. The first one, if you can see, but I'll read it out loud. How has using Visualizing SEP changed your workflow, the way you think?
It's kind of solidified the way in which I like to work and produce knowledge. I definitely have a habit where I can get caught in a loop. And, if I'm debugging a project that I'm working on or I'm writing something, I just end up hitting the same thing. And I'm in a loop and I can't break out of it. And one of the things that this project has really made me think of when I'm in one of those loops is, no, you want to build a new intuition. You want to be presented with something that is going to be new, not exactly what it is that you were looking for. You mentioned in the event info, I studied filmmaking in college, and there's a really, really famous film editor, Walter Murch, who's just revolutionary editor and sound designer. And he wrote a book about the transition from editing on film itself to editing digitally. And one of the things that he said that was really interesting and applies to this is when you're editing on film, especially you had these giant flatbed editors where you had 10-minute reels of film. And I'm sure you're aware of this, Nick. And you had a Steenbeck or a Moviola, and you had to go forward or backward. You didn't have access to everything. You had access to your 10-minute reel, and then you had to switch the reel up for a different part of the film. Murch said that one of the things that he has missed in the transition from film to digital was that digital only always gives you exactly what you want. And there's a tyranny to only getting what you want. Whereas when you were editing a sequence in film, having to scroll back and forth and back and forth, you're presented with similar information, but it's not quite the same. And that was something that he used for his own creativity, for the way in which he wanted to cut a scene, is that process of going back and forth gave him what he needed and not necessarily what he wanted. And I think that's a decent metaphor for thinking about how to navigate philosophy with the site, but how the metaphor of visualizing SEP can also impact our own thinking.
Yeah, you just gave me an aha moment. I'm not even kidding, because I have read that book. It's foundational for anyone who wants to edit.
Absolutely right.
And I always thought, wow, how I missed being able to crank on this thing where all the footage is flying past you, and that's the only way you can navigate it. And I just realized though that was something that I've kind of taken into that linking your thinking methodology with flying around links and navigating structures that you build that have personally meaningful value to you. And why that's so important is because it's through the navigation that where I imagine in the brain, neurons are connecting because you're actively making these connections again as you go through this footage. And to your point, intuition building. But I never thought about that metaphor, but it was there. It was in the way back of my mind, I think,
Mhm.
guiding that because of, his words of how valuable it was to get those kind of almost subconscious repetitions
Yeah,
of how things are connected and what they are. So wow, thank you for bringing that up. That's quite something.
Merch is a genius.
Yeah. Here's from Edith. Now that this resource exists, how easy hard would it be to create similar tools for other sets of interlinked documents, such as a person's PKM or even all of Wikipedia?
Mhm. So that's actually one of the things that I'm actively exploring in the back of my head because I haven't had time for actually to do this. But the architecture for visualizing SEP it's pretty specific to the document structure of the encyclopedia itself. But I'm really interested in taking this metaphor and really finding ways to generalize this relationship and taking this and using visualizing SEP really as a prototype interface for developing interfaces to explore any large scale networked set of data. I think
Mhm.
there's a real potential here to really change the way we explore large data sets. So it's not a simple process, Edith, but it's absolutely something that can be done. If you want to send me an email, we can talk about it. I met someone else from having published my site, and he and I are kind of trying to work on some ideas about how we can take this metaphor and apply it to different data sets.
To that point, it's interesting to see how you did it. So the thing that I keep on thinking that really draws my attention is that you chose out of Indiana's ontology system, you found 27 domains. It wasn't 270, take off that zero. It was 27. And that seemed to be with how many notes? It was 1708
1708 articles.
articles. Okay, 1708 articles, 27. So I'm just trying to do, what are these kind of invisible, um, what am I trying to say? Invisible uh, ratios that start to form that give us meaningful value. And it's just one data point with one data set, but I think it's interesting. So if we just take that out loud, these are the things I'm interested in. So basically 1708 divided by 27. So 63 articles for every domain. I know they're linked in
Yeah.
multiple ways and they're fluid, but I'm just trying to think out loud how these relationships form.
Yeah, I mean, if you go to the about page on the site, it'll actually show you the number of articles, and there are 18,000 links between the articles and the 27 domains. And it's the first time that I visualized this, I actually tried to visualize the entire data set all at once. And just my computer was like, nope. There are too many edges. Like when you look at network graph theory and then you have the links and the edges, the way in which D3 initially uses these SVG graphics for the web, and 18,000 links for an SVG in a browser window was not going to work. Now, there's different ways you could visualize that, but that's too much data. Like we don't have the ability to really make meaning from that many data points that aren't structured. But the way when you can break it down and organize it, now you can make meaning through these large data sets, but in these individual chunks.
Yeah. Yeah. This is pretty wild. We have 5 more minutes until we're at the hour mark. So if you're reading through these, do you see the Q&As, Joe?
Yep.
If there's any that really jump out to you, go ahead.
I can answer Asher's question about how are the links generated. The way in which I did this is I used, there's a library in Python called Beautiful Soup, and it's a web scraping library. So I scraped the entire encyclopedia, downloaded all of the articles, and then I wrote a spider to basically look at individual parts of each article. Each article in the, let me find it here, I'll show you. Every article in the SEP has a section called related entries. And what that is those are the links that the editors and the authors, see if I can show it to you here. Here we go. So in this article here, this article links out to 3 other articles. So how I built the links for this is when I scraped the entire site, I captured every article in every related entry from this section of the page in every article. I threw that into my database, and then I ran a series of links looking at like what was going out from each article, and then how those different links, when looked at, which linked into what. And then that's how I built the actual graphs themselves, is by looking at all the information in the related entry section for each of the 1,708 articles. And that's where we get the power, because these are the articles that the editors were like, all right, this is related. And that's where Visualizing SEP gets all of its power. It's from this related entry section that's pulled from every single article.
Very nice. Something that seems to be standing out, I'm looking at John's comment or question there, but that, and this also, I see another comment from John a little bit later on. 2 days ago, we had on Ryan J.A. Murphy, and he was talking about integrated thinking environments. So you must be familiar with IDEs, integrated development environments, since you can program. And then so he's saying there are these integrated thinking environments, such as Obsidian, Logsec, Rome, those type of tools that allow us, at least from a personal knowledge management position, to create these environments that help our thinking. And they can do so many things. They can do whatever we need them to do. It's a very exciting time. And it does seem as though what you're showing is possible with these large data sets, other ways to kind of create these integrated thinking environments. What I like about it, and this, I'm just trying to like kind of tie this into John's question at the top there, Joe, that you can see, but we have this information. There was a time when it was hard to get your hands on a book. It was hard to get, access to things. We're not there anymore. If we have access to the internet, we're not there. We have too much. And so it's really about knowing where the signal is. That's part one. But then part two is kind of, and there's a responsibility from people who are sharing this information in a way to kind of evoke the audience to lean forward and somehow engage and wrestle with the material. Doesn't mean they will, but that's, I think, one of the fun challenges that we find ourselves in, is how to present information so it can become personal knowledge that people can grow with. I think what you're doing is great. I'm just kind of curious your comments on this, as it might tie into, John's comment there.
Yeah, I think to John's point, that the idea that this was both educational and actionable was kind of built into what I was trying to do with that. We have a system where the nice thing about something like the Stanford Encyclopedia is it's a gatekeeper resource. Like these articles have been vetted, and we can then take that knowledge that has been vetted, and now we can provide a new way to interface with it. And in that way, there really is this ability to challenge ourselves. Like, one of the things that I always say is, I love to lose an argument. And an argument, I mean like a discussion. If I'm talking to my friend about something and my friend just destroys the premise of my argument, I'm like, awesome, thank you. You have done me a service, because where my thinking was incorrect, where it had gone off, you have now shown me where I went wrong. Like, if you read any of my writing, it can be really pedantic sometimes, because I really try to show the structure of how I got to my conclusion, so that the person that who's reading my article can be like, no, at inference C is you went totally off the rails, and that's how you should have done it. And for me, I have no shame in when I'm wrong with something like that, because I got to learn something new today. And I think these resources increase the ability that there's no shame in being incorrect. If you're incorrect, honestly, you thought you were making the best argument. Yes, motivated reasoning and confirmation bias are the devils that hide in all of our brains. Being aware of those kinds of biases, though, gives you that opportunity to actually alter and hopefully improve your thought process, not just in terms of the answers, but the way in which you're even approaching the questions themselves.
Yeah, this is just really great, Joe. I think we've kind of hit on this again and again, but the why you did this and what's it all about for you. It seems that there's just so much joy and passion that's gone into this. So, what are your final words around visualizing SEP?
I hope everyone loves it and everyone who uses it can get the pleasure out of it that I get. I mean, in some sense, I built a tool for me. I built something that like I would like to use that like I think is cool and pretty and functional. And I don't think I'm the only one there. You reached out to me. I know folks have enjoyed it, and I'm really excited that folks are using it and enjoying it. And I definitely plan on just keeping this site live for as long as I can, adding to it, having fun with it. I want to grow it eventually. And yeah, I'm just really glad that folks are enjoying it.
Well, bravo to you. I'm going to do the raise hand toggle, which is a way that we can give Joe some digital claps or high fives. No, this is seriously, it was really great. What I hope comes from this is, I really mean this. You're a great, brilliant mind in this world. And what's really cool is we've all come at it from a little bit of a different angle. I think, like myself, I kind of stumbled backwards into this Obsidian beta, and then all of a sudden became really, I guess, somebody out there talking about knowledge management. And you came at it from a completely different place, your love and passion for philosophy, just kind of putting these things together. And it's really interesting to kind of see how we're all solving problems around, meaningful knowledge. And so I hope that some other people reach out to you and continue working with you, so your brilliant mind can kind of maybe go into other data sets, or it can be applied to other situations, because I love what you're doing here, and you've just provided such a beautiful gift for all of us.
Thank you so much.
Bravo to you.
Thank you, everyone. And yeah, please, anyone reach out to me if you have questions, comments, criticism, thoughts. I would love to hear it. I would love to talk about it.
Okay, we'll wrap things up now, and I'll make sure if anyone didn't see Joe's email or website in the chat, and then you didn't see it in the event bio either, just reach out to me too if you're wondering how to get a hold of Joe, and we'll make it happen. Okay, well, thank you so much. Thanks for everyone's time, and thank you again, Joe, for your presence and amazing chat with you today. So, wishing everyone the best.
This was great. Thank you so much, Nick, and everyone.
Bye for now.
All right, bye-bye.